The sterile white lights of St. Mary's Medical Center flickered softly above the delivery room, casting a pale glow over the tense faces gathered inside. Outside, the small town of Ashwood, Oregon, slept quietly under a blanket of spring rain, but within these walls, the air crackled with nervous energy. Emily Parker gripped the edges of the hospital bed, her knuckles white, her forehead damp with sweat. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks as another contraction ripped through her body. She clenched her teeth, breathing hard, willing herself to push through the pain. Beside her, Ryan Walker, her husband, hovered with an anxious expression, his eyes darting between her and the monitors that beeped steadily. His hand trembled slightly as he brushed a damp strand of hair from her forehead. "You're doing amazing, babe," Ryan whispered, though his voice cracked with fear. "Just hang in there. Almost there." Emily couldn't speak. The pain was overwhelming, primal, as if her body was splitting apart. She had gone into labor 2 weeks past her due date, despite assurances from the doctors that everything was progressing normally. But for days, she had felt something off. A gnawing instinct deep in her gut told her this wasn't going to be a typical birth. Dr. Alan Reynolds, the attending obstetrician, stood at the foot of the bed, eyes narrowed at the fetal heart monitor. The readings were steady, heartbeat normal, oxygen levels good, but there was a knot of uncertainty in his stomach. Something wasn't right, though he couldn't explain what. "Okay, Emily," Dr. Reynolds said firmly. "One more big push. You can do this." Drawing on the last reserves of her strength, Emily bore down. The pain was blinding, thunderous, and for a terrifying moment, the world around her blurred into white noise. Then, piercing through the haze, a sound, a sharp, shrill cry. But instead of relief washing over the room, an eerie silence followed. No applause, no tears of joy. The nurse exchanged frozen glance. Dr. Reynolds stiffened. Emily's chest tightened with panic. She turned her head weakly toward Ryan. His face had gone pale. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed at the foot of the bed, mouth slightly agape. "Ryan," Emily's voice quivered. "Is the baby okay? Why isn't anyone saying anything?" No one answered. Dr. Reynolds stepped forward, motioning for a nurse to carry the newborn to the observation table. "No," Emily gasped, struggling to sit up despite the searing pain. "Let me see him. I want to see my baby." "You need to rest," Dr. Reynolds insisted, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Don't touch me," Emily snapped, shoving his hand away, her eyes wild with fear and anger. "Where is my son?" One of the nurses hesitated, glancing at Dr. Reynolds, who finally gave a reluctant nod. Wrapped loosely in a hospital blanket, the nurse cradled the infant and turned toward Emily. It was only a glimpse, but it was enough. A gasp escaped Emily's lips as her eyes locked onto her newborn's face. His tiny, delicate features were obscured beneath a thick layer of jet-black fur. It wasn't the soft fuzz newborns typically had, it was dense, coarse, animal-like. The fur covered his forehead, cheeks, even his eyelids. His little arms and legs, peeking from beneath the blanket, were coated in the same dark hair. "What?" Emilie's voice cracked. "What is that?" Dr. Reynolds exhaled heavily, visibly rattled. "We're not sure. We're running tests. But he's alive. He's breathing. His vitals are strong." The nurse gently rocked the whimpering infant, then quickly disappeared out the door, leaving a trail of stunned silence behind. Emily collapsed back onto the bed, her body shaking. Her heart raced as 1,000 terrifying thoughts flooded her mind. "What do you mean, you're not sure?" Émilie demanded, voice raw with exhaustion and fear. "Is he sick? Is he in pain?" Ryan finally spoke, his voice tight with disbelief. "Émilie, you don't understand. I saw." Dr. Reynolds interrupted cautiously. "There are rare conditions, congenital hypertrichosis. It causes excessive hair growth, but this isn't typical. We've never seen anything quite like this." Emily's pulse roared in her ears. "Are you saying, my baby's a freak?" "No one is saying that," Dr. Reynolds replied quickly. "But we need to examine him. We need to understand what's happening." "I want to see him," Emily demanded. "Now." "It's not safe yet," Dr. Reynolds tried to explain, but Emily's eyes flared with rage. "He's my son," she snapped. "You don't get to tell me when I can hold him." Dr. Reynolds glanced uneasily at Ryan, but Ryan looked away, his face contorted with shock and something Emily couldn't quite place. Shame? Fear?
The room fell silent again.
Outside, faint murmurs echoed down the hallway. A nurse whispered into a phone.
Someone shuffled paperwork.
An email pinged on a nearby computer. But none of it mattered to Emily. All that mattered was the invisible cord tethering her to her child, an unbreakable bond forged the moment she knew he existed. She didn't care about tests or diagnoses. She didn't care about the whispers of doctors and nurses beyond the door. She needed her son. In that sterile, cold hospital room, beneath the beeping monitors and the fluorescent lights, Emily Parker made a silent vow. No matter what the world saw when they looked at her child, no matter how different or strange he appeared, he was hers. And she would protect him with everything she had. The sterile walls of St. Mary's Medical Center seemed to close in around Emily as the hours dragged on. It had been 6 hours since she gave birth to her son, 6 hours since she saw the stunned, frozen expressions of the medical staff, 6 hours of waiting for answers that never came. She sat upright in her hospital bed, her body sore and exhausted, her heart pounding with unanswered questions. The baby monitor beside her beeped steadily, the rhythmic sound doing little to ease her anxiety. The door creaked open, and Ryan entered, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, and his expression distant. "I didn't ask for coffee," Emily said quietly, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and frustration. "I thought, you might want something warm," Ryan replied, offering the cup without meeting her gaze. She ignored the coffee, her eyes locked onto his. "Have you seen him?" Ryan hesitated. His fingers fidgeted with the lid of the coffee cup, his lips pressed into a tight line. "They let me see him, for a minute," he admitted finally, his voice trembling. "He's sleeping. Still covered in fur." Emily's throat tightened. "Fur. That's all anyone keeps saying. No one's telling me if he's healthy, if he's sick, if he's okay." Ryan looked up, startled by the raw desperation in her voice. "Of course he's our son. He's okay." "Then say his name," Emily whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. Ryan's lips parted slightly, his expression pained. For a moment, he was silent. Then, barely audible, he whispered, "Ethan."
Emilies Schulder sagged at tears welled up.
Ethan. That was the name they had chosen if it was a boy. A name that carried hope, strength, and love. A name for the child she had dreamed of for 9 long months. The door opened again, interrupting the fragile moment. Dr. Reynolds entered, accompanied by a woman in her early 40s, dressed in a tailored gray suit and carrying a sleek leather folder. "Good morning," Dr. Reynolds greeted, his expression composed but strained.
"This is Dr. Rachel Monroe."
She's a geneticist from Stanford's Pediatric Research Center.
Docteur. Monroe extended a hand, her face professionnelle yet kind.
"Mrs. Parker, I know this is an incredibly difficult time. I want to assure you, we're here to help." Emily didn't shake her hand. Her gaze remained guarded. "Then where is my son?" Dr. Monroe took a slow breath. "He's in the neonatal observation suite. Stable. Normal vitals.
Strong heartbeat.
Healthy oxygen levels. By all medical standards, he's a healthy newborn." "Except for the hair," Emily cut in. "Yes," Dr. Monroe nodded gently. "The hair is unusual. It's thicker and more evenly distributed than typical lanugo. It resembles a rare condition known as congenital hypertrichosis." "I've already heard that term," Emily snapped. "It's the polite way of saying he looks like a werewolf, right?" That's what the nurses were whispering. "No," Dr. Monroe replied firmly. "It's not about folklore. Hypertrichosis is real, though extremely rare. Fewer than 100 documented cases worldwide. Most are genetic. But," she hesitated, flipping open her folder. "In Ethan's case, our preliminary genetic screening found no known mutations or hereditary markers that would explain this."
Emilies' eyes widened.
"What does that mean?" "It means," Dr. Monroe said carefully, "that this may be something entirely new. Which is why we'd like to conduct further testing. More advanced genetic sequencing. Metabolic panels. Possibly small biopsies."
"No," Emilie interrupted, her voice sharp.
"You want to poke and prod him like a science experiment." Dr. Monroe's expression softened. I understand how this sounds, but our goal is to find answers, for you, for Ethan, for his future. Emily's eyes flicked to Ryan, but he looked away, his jaw clenched, his fingers fidgeting with the coffee cup again. I want to see him, Emily demanded, her voice unwavering. Not through glass.
You want to hold my baby.
Dr. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. Emily, we're concerned about the emotional stress this could cause. You don't get to decide what's best for my son, Emily snapped, her eyes blazing. I carried him for 9 months.
Y endure every ache, every sleepless night, every fear.
I get to hold him. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Dr. Monroe gave a small nod. 10 minutes, she agreed. Limited contact, but you'll be with him. 10 minutes later, Emily was wheeled down a quiet hallway into the neonatal wing. The lights here were dimmer, the atmosphere hushed, reverent. A nurse guided her through a secure door into a room with 2 large observation windows and a single incubator. Inside, Ethan lay on a soft blanket, swaddled in a pale blue cloth. His tiny chest rose and fell in peaceful rhythm. Even under the overhead light, his dark fur shimmered like silk. Emily pressed her palm to the glass, her heart aching with longing. He's perfect, she whispered. Dr. Monroe stood beside her. We can let you in, but we'll have to limit contact for now. I don't need hours, Emily said quietly. I just need to feel him in my arms. The nurse entered first, lifting Ethan with delicate care. When she placed him in Emily's waiting arms, a hush fell over the room. Emily stared down at him. His face, though hidden behind the fine fur, held all the softness, the fragility, the innocence of a newborn. His tiny fingers curled instinctively around hers. His eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing a deep, rich amber gaze. He looks just like Ryan did as a baby, Emily murmured, tears blurring her vision. Behind her, Ryan stood silent, watching, his emotions unreadable. You're not a monster, Emily whispered to her son, brushing her lips to his forehead.
A soft knock at the glass interrupted the moment.
A nurse pointed toward the hallway. Dr. Monroe's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then looked up, her expression unreadable. There's been a development, Dr. Monroe said quietly. I need to speak with Dr. Reynolds.
I'll be back.
She left quickly, her heels clicking down the hall. Emily held Ethan closer, breathing in his scent, his warmth, his weight. He was hers. And no matter what happened next, no doctor, no scientist, no authority on earth, could change that. The soft hum of machines filled the hospital room as Emily sat by the window, cradling Ethan in her arms. It had been nearly 8 hours since his birth, 8 hours of confusion, fear, and unanswered questions. The sterile walls of St. Mary's were closing in, suffocating her with the weight of uncertainty. Ethan's breathing was steady, his small chest rising and falling beneath the thin hospital blanket. His fur, coarse and dark when she first saw him, seemed softer now under the dim light. His tiny fingers clung to hers with surprising strength. Emily hadn't let go of him since they allowed her to hold him. She refused to. It was the only thing grounding her, the only thing keeping the room's cold reality from crushing her. The door opened. Ryan stepped in, looking more disheveled than before. His hair was unkempt, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles shadowed his eyes. He closed the door quietly behind him, carrying nothing but his expression, tight, conflicted, lost. We need to talk, he said, his voice low, strained. Emily didn't move. Her gaze remained fixed on Ethan, her thumb gently tracing circles over his tiny hand. Talk, she said flatly. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then crossed the room, stopping a few feet away from the bed. His shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the world rested upon them. I've been thinking, he began, about everything. About what happens next. Emily finally looked up, her eyes sharp but weary. They're saying there's a research institute in California, Ryan continued. A place that specializes in rare genetic conditions. They could help him. Emily's jaw tightened. Help him. Ryan nodded quickly. Maybe they can reduce the hair. Maybe they can. I don't know, understand what caused this. Emily shifted Ethan in her arms, her eyes narrowing. He doesn't need to be fixed. Ryan exhaled, frustration flashing across his face. You don't know that.
What if? This is just the beginning?
What if there's more going on inside him? What if? Or what if he's just different, Emily interrupted, and we're the ones who need to change? I'm trying to think ahead, Ryan pressed, his voice cracking. School. Friends. Other kids. You know how cruel people can be. I'll homeschool him if I have to, Emily shot back. That's not a solution, Emily. That's hiding.
Emily stood, still cradling Ethan.
Her posture was protective, defiant. I'm protecting him, she said firmly. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small room. His frustration was palpable, but beneath it, fear simmered. We can't do this alone, he said. You know that. I can, Emily snapped. And I will. A long silence settled between them. Ryan stopped pacing, his gaze softening, though the worry didn't leave his eyes. Do you hear yourself? He asked quietly. You're acting like we can just pretend everything's normal. But he's not normal, Emily.
C'est what you really mean, Emily challenged.
Ryan looked down at the floor. His voice dropped to a whisper. You don't know what people are saying. The hospital leaked a photo. It's already on the internet. People, they're calling him a freak. A mutation. Emily's heart clenched, but her expression didn't waver. I don't care what they say, she said. But I do. Ryan's voice rose sharply, then faltered, guilt flashing across his face. I care about what this does. To us. To him. To you. Emily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Her grip on Ethan tightened. No, Ryan, she said softly, but with steel beneath her words. You care about what it does to you. Ryan turned away, pacing again. The room felt colder, heavier with every passing second. My mom called, Ryan admitted. She said she won't come near the baby. She said, our family isn't prepared to deal with this. Emily's throat constricted. Pain, familiar and sharp, bloomed in her chest. So what? She asked bitterly. You're going to choose them over us? Ryan didn't answer immediately. His silence was more telling than any words. I don't know what I'm choosing, he confessed, his voice barely audible. I didn't sign up for this, Emily. Tears burned at the corners of Emily's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You don't get to pick what kind of child you have, she said, her voice breaking. You only get to choose whether or not to love them. Ryan stood still for a long moment, his expression torn, his eyes clouded with fear and uncertainty. I'm scared, he admitted. I don't know how to handle this. I look at him, and all I see are questions I can't answer. People are watching us like we're monsters. Like, he's some science experiment. Emily's shoulders straightened, her grip on Ethan unwavering. Then maybe, she said quietly, you're not the father he needs. Ryan's eyes widened slightly at her words, his face slackening. I need time, he said after a pause. I need to think. Emily didn't look at him.
Take all the time you want.
The door closed softly behind him, the finality of it settling over the room like a heavy fog. That night, a nurse entered to check Emily's vitals. She glanced at the cot beside the bed, the one Ryan had occupied the previous nights. It was empty. The nurse didn't ask why. Emily didn't offer an explanation. By morning, a hospital administrator arrived with a discharge form. Dr. Monroe followed shortly after, her expression unreadable but cautious. Emily, Dr. Monroe began, her tone measured, I want to be honest with you. The hospital board is under pressure. The media has caught wind of Ethan's birth. We've received calls from news outlets, advocacy groups, even private labs offering support. You mean, Emily cut in, they want to take him away? Dr. Monroe's lips pressed into a thin line. There are whispers.
Nothing official.
Yet. Emily's mind raced, her protective instincts roaring to the surface. I'm leaving today, she declared. Dr. Monroe nodded slowly. I figured you might. Emily packed her belongings methodically, swaddling Ethan with care. A nurse escorted her through a side exit, away from the waiting reporters near the main lobby.
Ryan never came back.
Outside, the Oregon rain fell in thin sheets, the gray clouds heavy with secrets. Emily climbed into the old Ford parked by the curb. Her cousin's husband, Mark, sat behind the wheel, his face tight with quiet concern. He didn't ask questions. He simply started the engine. For the first time in days, Emily exhaled. They drove for hours, leaving behind the hospital, the cameras, the whispers. The city faded into winding roads and endless stretches of forest. By dusk, they reached a small cabin hidden deep within the pine trees. It wasn't home, but it was safe. Emily stood on the porch, Ethan pressed to her chest, her eyes scanning the darkening woods. "You're safe now," she whispered to her son. But in her heart, she knew, this was only the beginning. The cabin sat in the middle of nowhere, tucked between towering pine trees and endless stretches of rugged hills. The old wooden structure creaked with every gust of wind, its faded walls bearing the scars of time. But to Emily, it was a fortress. There were no reporters here.
No curieux docteurs.
No glass walls or sterile hospital lights.
Juste trees, silence, and the stadium of nature.
The first few nights were the hardest. Every creak of the floorboards sent Emily's heart racing. Every rustle outside sounded like footsteps. She barely slept, clutching Ethan close to her chest, listening to his soft breathing and the rhythmic beating of his tiny heart. Ethan cried often, like any newborn. He woke at odd hours, demanded to be fed, held, rocked. But there were no visitors bringing balloons or casseroles. No family cooing over his tiny hands or eyes. No photos shared online announcing his arrival. Just Emily, her child, and the quiet, exhausting determination of a mother with no other choice. Mark visited every few days, bringing groceries, formula, diapers, and anything else she needed. He never asked questions, never pried into details of what had happened at the hospital. But his cautious glances toward the woods told Emily he knew enough. Weeks passed. Emily developed a routine to keep her sanity intact. She bathed Ethan in a plastic tub on the kitchen counter. She made oatmeal for herself and bottle-fed him while standing by the window, always scanning the forest for signs of movement. She sang lullabies to him in the evenings, the same soft melodies her mother once sang to her. Her phone stayed off, buried deep in a kitchen drawer. Whatever the world was saying out there couldn't reach them here. Or so she hoped. But the forest couldn't protect them forever.
One morning, after rocking Ethan back to sleep, Emily powered on her laptop.
The screen flickered to life, sluggish from weeks of disuse. The internet connection was weak, borrowed from an outdated wireless hotspot Mark had set up. Her inbox was flooded with spam, news alerts, and messages from worried acquaintances who had heard rumors but didn't know the truth. One email stood out. A client from Seattle, asking if she was available for a freelance translation project. Emily hesitated. Her savings were nearly gone. The groceries, medical supplies, and formula were adding up fast. She replied to the message, accepting the job. Within a few days, she was working again, translating technical documents while Ethan slept beside her in a makeshift crib crafted from an old dresser drawer and a pile of folded towels. The work was tedious, but it kept her mind busy. It was the only piece of her old life she could salvage. But the illusion of peace shattered quickly. One crisp autumn morning, Emily stepped onto the porch with Ethan swaddled against her chest. The air smelled of pine and wet earth.
Sunlight filtered through the trees.
Something sat on the porch railing. A newspaper. Her stomach twisted as she picked it up. There was no note. No delivery bag. Just the folded pages, damp with morning dew. On the front page, in bold, sensational letters.
Werewolf baby born in Oregon hospital. Medical miracle hors dangereux mutation.
Beneath the headline was a grainy photo, taken in secret, likely from inside the hospital. The image showed Ethan, only hours old, wrapped in a blanket, his small face partially visible beneath tufts of dark fur.
Emilie s'en shook.
Her eyes skimmed the article. The story recounted the mysterious birth at St. Mary's, quoting anonymous hospital staff. It mentioned government interest, wild theories about genetic experiments, and dark warnings from extremist groups like the Pure Humanity Coalition. There were whispers about custody battles. About scientists demanding access to study the child. About potential legal action to remove him from Emily's care. Her chest tightened. Her breath quickened. She crumpled the newspaper and shoved it into the wood stove, watching it curl and blacken in the flames. That night, she triple-checked every lock on the doors and windows. She rocked Ethan until he fell asleep, his soft breaths warming her neck. But sleep never came for her. The next morning, Mark arrived with supplies and a warning. "You need to be careful," he said, setting down bags of groceries. His eyes were hard, his jaw clenched.
Emilies pulse weekend.
"What happened?" "I heard from someone at the hospital," Mark explained. "A private research group filed a formal request to contact you. They claim it's for a non-invasive longitudinal study on Ethan." Emily's stomach churned.
They don't know where we are.
"They don't," Mark confirmed. "But they're looking." The days that followed blurred together. Emily lived in constant vigilance. She rarely ventured beyond the property. Every unfamiliar sound, every unfamiliar vehicle passing on the distant dirt road sent waves of panic through her. Ethan continued to grow, fast. His fur, once thick and dark across his body, began to thin. At first, Emily thought she was imagining it. But within a week, patches of soft pale skin appeared beneath the strands. His cheeks lost their shadow of fuzz. His arms and legs smoothed. By 3 months old, most of the fur was gone. Only a faint peach-like fuzz remained under his clothes and cap, making him nearly indistinguishable from any other infant. But Emily wasn't naive enough to believe the world would forget. One chilly evening, as she sat by the fireplace, rocking Ethan to sleep, her laptop buzzed with a new email.
The sender was unfamiliar.
The subject line sent ice through her veins. "We know he's special. Let us help you." Emily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. There was no name, no details, just a link. She didn't click it. Instead, she shut the laptop, drew Ethan close and whispered, "They won't get to you. I promise." But deep down, she knew the forest couldn't shield them forever.
And the world outside?
It was still watching. The following weeks slipped by with a fragile, uneasy quiet. Emily kept her routines simple.
Wake up before sunrise.
Feed Ethan.
Scan the woods.
Work on translations while he napped. Check the locks. Check them again. But the stillness was a lie, and Emily knew it.
The anonymous email haunted her.
The words echoed in her head every time the wind whispered through the trees. "We know he's special. Let us help you." She never replied. She never clicked the link. But ignoring it didn't make the danger go away. The first true warning came on a bitter November evening. It was nearing dusk when Emily noticed the car. An unfamiliar black SUV parked at the edge of the narrow dirt road that wound past the property. Its tinted windows reflected the dying light.
No one got out.
The engine idled for a moment, then the vehicle turned and disappeared down the road. Emily's pulse hammered in her throat. She told herself it could be anyone.
A lost ticket.
A hunter. A delivery mistake. But in her gut, she knew better. The next morning, she found the note. It was pinned to the cabin door with a rusty nail. The paper was thin, torn at the edges, the handwriting scrawled in sharp, angry letters.
Fric don't belong here.
We're watching.
Emilies en trembled as she tore the note down.
Mark arrived later that day with supplies. His easy-going facade cracked the moment she showed him the note. "I'll stay tonight," he said, setting down the groceries. His hand instinctively brushed the grip of the pistol holstered under his jacket. Emily didn't argue. They reinforced the windows. Checked the locks. Mark set up motion detectors along the tree line. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. That night, Emily barely slept. She cradled Ethan by the fire, staring at the darkened windows, listening for sounds that didn't belong. At 2:37 a.m., it happened.
The crash of glass. The sharp hiss of liquid. The roar of sudden flame. Molotov cocktail.
Emily bolted upright. Mark was already at the door, pistol drawn. "Stay down," he shouted. Outside, the front porch was ablaze. Shadows moved among the trees, figures in dark hoodies, masks obscuring their faces. One of them held a bottle aloft, a lighter flickering in his hand. Emily's heart raced as she ducked behind the couch, shielding Ethan with her body.
Mark fired a warning shot into the air. The attacker scattered, disappearing into the woods.
It was over in seconds, but the smell of smoke lingered, thick and suffocating. They extinguished the flames quickly. The damage was minimal, charred wood, broken glass, but the message was clear. They were not safe. In the aftermath, as Mark swept the perimeter and Emily soothed a crying Ethan, a terrifying realization gripped her. Ethan hadn't been harmed. Not even close. But when she examined his back, she noticed something strange. Where the last patches of fur had clung to his skin, there was now something new. A faint layer of hardened tissue.
Almost like skull.
Thin, flexible, but tough as leather. Emily ran her fingers over the texture. It wasn't fur. It wasn't ordinary skin. It was armor. She rocked Ethan gently, her mind spinning. Her son wasn't just different. He was evolving. The next morning, Mark paced the living room, frustration etched across his face. "We can't stay here," he said.
They know where you are.
"It's just a matter of time before they come back." "Where would we go?" Emily whispered, exhaustion heavy in her voice. Mark hesitated. "You need help. Real help." Emily stiffened.
If you say Rachel Monroe, I swear.
"She's the only one who understands this," Mark cut in. "And like it or not, she's been honest with you." Emily's shoulders slumped. She hated that Mark was right. Dr. Rachel Monroe, the geneticist from Stanford, was the only person with both the scientific knowledge and the moral compass to help them. But reaching out meant exposure. It meant risk. Emily spent the next 2 days weighing her options.
Watching the woods. Holding Ethan close.
Listening to her instincts. Finally, she made the call. Rachel answered on the second ring. "Emily," she said softly, her voice laced with concern. "I've been waiting for this." Within hours, Rachel arranged a private, secure meeting at a university-affiliated clinic 2 towns over.
Emily paquet the essential.
Diapers.
Formula.
A change of clothes for Ethan. And the documents, the hospital records, the news clippings, the threats. Mark drove them under cover of darkness. The roads were empty. The world outside was asleep. The clinic was quiet, tucked between office buildings, far from prying eyes. A security guard waved them through a side entrance. Inside, the facility was warm, clean and sterile, but not cold. It lacked the intimidating aura of St. Mary's. There were no gawking nurses. No whispers. Just Rachel, waiting in a small exam room. Her expression softened when she saw Emily cradling Ethan. "He's beautiful," Rachel said quietly. Emily sat down, holding her son protectively. "No tests," she warned.
No needles.
"You can look. That's it." Rachel nodded. "I promise." For the next half hour, Rachel examined Ethan, gently, carefully. She noted his reflexes, his skin tone, the faint remnants of his fur. She ran a portable scanner along his back, analyzing the hardened tissue beneath his skin. When she finished, her expression turned grave. "Emily," she began, turning the screen toward her, "your son is healthy. His organs, vitals, everything is functioning perfectly. But this," she pointed to the scan, "this isn't normal." Emily's stomach tightened.
What is it? Rachel hesitated.
"His body is developing a secondary dermal layer. A protective mesh, almost. It's soft most of the time, but under stress, heat, impact, threat, it hardens."
Emily exhaled slowly.
"It protected him from the fire." "Yes," Rachel confirmed. "It's an adaptive defense mechanism."
Something beyond human evolution.
Emily's mind spun with possibilities, fears, questions. "What does that mean?" she asked. "What is he?" Rachel's gaze softened, but her answer was firm. "He's your son," she said. "But he may also be the first of something new." The words echoed in Emily's head long after Rachel had spoken them. The first of something new. It wasn't just a scientific observation. It was a warning. It was a promise. It was a heavy, terrifying truth she wasn't ready for. Emily sat silently in the small examination room, cradling Ethan against her chest. His tiny body was warm and steady, oblivious to the weight of the conversation unfolding around him. Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Emily, I need you to understand what this means. Ethan isn't just different, he represents something unprecedented. His biology, this dermal adaptation, it's unlike anything seen in recorded human history."
Emily's eyes narrowed.
You think he's dangerous? Rachel shook her head quickly.
No.
But the world will. There was a long silence.
What happen now?
Emily finally asked, her voice low.
Rachel hesitated.
I want to continue observing him. Strictly on your terms, no invasive procedures, no forced tests. But Emily, you need to prepare.
This won't stay hidden forever.
Someone somewhere is going to find you. And not all of them will ask permission. Emily's grip on Ethan tightened. They've already tried.
Rachel's expression darkened.
Then time is short. Before Emily could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mark stepped in, his face tense, eyes flicking between them. We have a problem, he announced. Emily's stomach turned to ice. What? Mark handed her a folded letter. The envelope bore the official seal of the Oregon Department of Health and Human Services. Emily opened it with shaking hands, scanning the contents. Her vision blurred as the words registered. In accordance with State Statute 117.4b, a hearing will be held to determine the custodial rights and long-term care protocol for minor child Ethan Parker. Her heart sank. They're trying to take him, she whispered. Rachel's jaw clenched. I was afraid of this. Mark spoke, his tone tight with frustration. It's a state petition, backed by medical boards, public health officials, and probably pressure from private labs. They're framing it as concern for Ethan's well-being and public safety. Emily's eyes burned. They want to lock him in a lab. They won't say that, Rachel replied bitterly. But yes. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Fear curled around her ribs, tightening with every breath. The hearing was scheduled in less than 2 weeks. Mark placed a steady hand on her shoulder. We'll fight this. How? Emily asked, her voice cracking. They have doctors, lawyers, politicians.
Oliavis. Mark interrupted.
And Rachel.
And now, Meb more.
Rachel nodded. I still have contacts. People who believe in ethics. In human rights. But Emily, this won't be easy. Emily looked down at Ethan, peacefully asleep in her arms, unaware of the storm gathering around him. She had survived labor, the hospital, the media circus, the arson attack. But this, the legal system, it was colder, more calculated. Harder to run from. And she was tired of running. 2 days later, Emily met with an attorney recommended by Rachel. His name was Daniel Brooks, a quiet, sharp-eyed man in his early 40s with years of experience in civil liberties cases. This is going to be messy, Daniel warned after reviewing the documents. The state is framing this as a child welfare issue, mixed with public safety concerns. They'll argue that Ethan's condition requires specialized care beyond what you can provide. I'm his mother, Emily stated firmly. No one cares more about his well-being than I do. Daniel nodded.
I believe you.
But you need to be ready for them to twist that. They'll bring experts. They'll use fear. They'll exploit public anxiety over mutations and unknown biology. Emily swallowed hard. How do we fight that? With facts, Daniel replied. With character witnesses. With documentation of his development, his health. And, his voice softened. If possible, with support from family. Emily hesitated. Her parents were gone. Ryan, she didn't even know where he was. But, her mind drifted to Margaret Walker, Ryan's mother. A woman who, months ago, recoiled in horror at the sight of her grandson. Emily's stomach twisted. But desperation left little room for pride. That night, after rocking Ethan to sleep, she made the call. The phone rang twice before Margaret answered. There was a long pause on the other end. Emily, Margaret's voice was guarded, cautious. I need your help, Emily said without preamble.
Another pause.
Then, I've been following the news. Emily closed her eyes briefly, gathering her courage. They're trying to take him.
There was silence. A heartbeat.
Then Margaret asked, voice softer, is he okay? He's healthy, Emily replied. Different. But healthy.
Another silence.
I made mistakes, Margaret admitted. I was scared. But I don't want to lose him.
I don't want to lose you.
Emily's throat tightened. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Margaret continued. I'm asking for a second chance. A long breath escaped Emily's lips. The past couldn't be erased. But maybe the future could still be salvaged. I need you to testify, Emily said. At the hearing.
I will, Margaret promised.
The days leading to the hearing were a blur of legal preparation, sleepless nights, and quiet moments with Ethan. Despite the fear gnawing at her, Emily refused to break. She refused to lose him. On the morning of the hearing, Emily dressed Ethan in soft blue clothes, wrapped him in a blanket, and carried him into the courthouse. The room was packed: journalists, spectators, officials. At the front sat the judge, stone-faced, eyes sharp. The state presented their case with clinical detachment, concerns over Ethan's biological anomalies, public safety risks, the need for specialized supervision. Emily took the stand. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke of love, resilience, and a mother's unbreakable bond. Then Margaret stood. The room quieted as she approached the bench. I was wrong, she confessed.
Il est fier contrôle me.
But my grandson is not a monster. He is not a threat. He is a boy. And he belongs with his mother. The judge listened. The attorneys argued.
The fate of Emily and Ethan in the balance.
But as Emily looked at her son, safe in her arms, her resolve hardened. No matter what the world saw when they looked at him, he was hers. And she would fight for him. The courtroom felt colder than it should have. The hum of whispers, the shuffling of papers, the distant clicks of cameras beyond the doors, all of it buzzed in Emily's ears as she stood before the judge. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady, holding Ethan close to her chest. His small body radiated warmth, the only steady thing in the whirlwind of uncertainty that surrounded them. The state's attorneys spoke first. They presented their case with calm, calculated precision. Photographs of Ethan as a newborn, with his fur-covered body, were displayed on a screen. Medical reports, signed by hospital officials, detailed his abnormal development. They quoted genetic experts who warned of unforeseen physiological risks and the need for controlled observation. They never once called him a monster. But they didn't have to. Their carefully chosen words painted a clear picture. Ethan was an anomaly, a potential threat, a child too dangerous to be raised outside the walls of scientific supervision.
Emilie Satornet, Daniel Brox, rose to speak.
His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the fog of fear the state had woven. You've heard the science, Daniel began. But what you haven't heard is the truth of this child's life, the love, the care, the stability provided by his mother. Emily listened as Daniel recounted her story.
The complication at the hospital. The media frenzy.
The threats from extremist groups.
The Firbon attack.
She's not hiding this child from medical care, Daniel continued. She's protecting him from exploitation.
From fear-driven violence.
From those who see him as nothing more than a lab specimen. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, listened without expression. Then, it was Emily's turn to speak. She stepped forward, her legs trembling slightly. The courtroom faded. All she could see was Ethan, asleep in her arms, his soft breaths warming her skin. My son isn't dangerous, Emily began, her voice wavering but growing stronger. He's different. Yes. But different doesn't mean wrong. She glanced toward the state attorneys, then the judge. I carried him for 9 months, Emily continued. I felt his heartbeat before anyone else did. I stayed up nights worrying, praying, preparing. And when he was born, I saw the fear in everyone's eyes, but all I saw was my child. Her throat tightened, but she pressed on. I've faced threats. I've been called a bad mother. I've been called reckless. But every decision I've made has been for his safety, his happiness.
A soft murmur rippled through the crowd.
Emily held Ethan higher, letting the judge see his peaceful, sleeping face. This isn't about science, she concluded. It's about love. It's about a child's right to grow up safe, not as a test subject, but as a human being. She stepped back, her heart pounding, her eyes locked on the judge. Next, Margaret approached the witness stand. There was a subtle tension in the room as she began to speak. I wasn't proud of my reaction when Ethan was born, Margaret admitted. I was scared.
Il est my fear, my ignorance, contrôle-me.
Her gaze swept across the room, lingering on Emily. But I've seen him. I've held him. And I've seen the strength in his mother. She paused, emotion thickening her voice. My grandson is not a science project, Margaret said firmly. He's not a danger. He's a child. And he belongs with his family. The judge thanked Margaret and called for a short recess. Emily returned to her seat, her legs weak but her spirit steady. Daniel leaned in. You did well, he whispered. Emily nodded, but her eyes never left the judge's bench. After the recess, the judge returned, her expression unreadable. She reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, the legal arguments. The room held its collective breath. Finally, the judge spoke. I have reviewed the case thoroughly, she began. The concerns raised by the state are understandable, given the unique nature of this situation. However, concern is not justification for stripping a parent of their rights.
Émiliès briscoqued.
Ms. Parker has demonstrated commitment, care, and the ability to provide for her son, the judge continued. There is no evidence of neglect or abuse. Medical oversight, if required, will be done with the family's consent, not through forced custody.
A wave of relief swept over Emily.
The petition for state custody is denied, the judge declared. Ethan Parker will remain in the care of his biological mother. This court imposes no restrictions at this time.
The gavel struck.
It was over. At least for now. Emily's knees nearly buckled as Daniel squeezed her shoulder. You did it, he said softly. Tears welled in her eyes as she cradled Ethan closer. Reporters swarmed as they exited the courthouse, shouting questions, shoving microphones forward. How does it feel to win?
Are you afraid for your safety?
Do you think your son is the next step in human evolution? Emily ignored them all. She climbed into Mark's car, locked the doors, and let out a shaky breath.
The drive back to Scabin was quiet.
The road twisted through pine forests, away from the cameras, away from the chaos. Ethan slept peacefully in his car seat. Margaret followed in her own car, and for the first time, Emily didn't mind the presence of family nearby. But even in victory, Emily's mind couldn't rest. The hearing was a battle, but the war wasn't over.
The Research Institute.
The extremist groups. The strangers with their eyes full of suspicion or curiosity. They hadn't given up. And neither could she. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Emily stood on the porch, staring at the stars through the towering trees. The cool Oregon air filled her lungs, sharp and clean. Mark joined her, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. You did good today, he said. Emily wrapped her arms around herself.
It's not over.
Mark nodded.
No.
But it's a start. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the wind rustle the trees. In the distance, an owl hooted softly. Emily closed her eyes, steadying her heart. Whatever came next, she would face it. For Ethan. For herself. For the quiet, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the world would learn to accept what it didn't understand. The weeks after the hearing passed in an uneasy calm. Emily returned to the cabin with Ethan, holding tightly to the court's ruling like a fragile shield against the world. Mark stayed close, visiting often, sometimes spending nights on the old couch with one eye open and his hand resting on his pistol. Margaret visited too, cautiously at first, as if testing the fragile trust that had been rebuilt. But over time, her presence softened. She held Ethan, fed him bottles, even sang him lullabies, old folk songs from her own childhood that seemed to calm him in ways Emily couldn't explain. Despite the occasional peaceful moments, Emily's instincts never let her fully relax. She kept the curtains drawn. She limited her time online. She used cash for groceries. She memorized the license plates of unfamiliar cars passing on the dirt road. But the whispers still reached them. It started with a radio segment, a local AM talk show discussing the Oregon werewolf baby. A sensationalist host speculated about government conspiracies and genetic experiments gone wrong. Then came the online forums. Photos of Ethan, heavily blurred but recognizable to those who knew, circulated in obscure corners of the internet. Some called him a miracle. Others called him a freak. A few claimed he was evidence of human evolution accelerating before their eyes. The worst, though, came from the extremist groups. Flyers appeared on telephone poles in town. Simple slogans, printed in bold letters. Pure humanity only.
Stop the expense.
Mutations aren't children. Mark tore them down every time he saw one, but it was like fighting a wildfire with a garden hose. One cold December morning, Emily found an envelope on the porch. There was no stamp.
No return address.
Just a plain cream-colored envelope tucked beneath a rock. Inside was a single sheet of paper.
We haven't forgotten. We never will.
The world deserves to know what you're hiding.
No signature.
No threats. But the message was clear. Emily burned the letter in the fireplace without hesitation. But the fear remained. Rachel Monroe called days later, her voice tight with concern. I've been contacted by an international research group, Rachel explained. Private. Well-funded. They claim to have been following Ethan's case. Emily's grip on the phone tightened. What do they want?
Rachel hesitated.
They offered protection, resources, discretion. But only if you agree to let them monitor him.
Emilie's blood ran cold.
Monitor him?
Like a science experiment.
They say it's voluntary, Rachel clarified. No forced testing. No removal from your custody. But Emily, organizations like this don't make offers out of kindness. Emily paced the living room, glancing toward Ethan, who was playing with soft blocks on the floor, blissfully unaware.
What a-t-on fait nous?
Emily asked.
Rachel's silence spoke volume.
They'll find other ways to get close, Rachel admitted. Through courts. Through public pressure.
Maybe worse.
Emily's stomach churned. I won't let them take him, she whispered. I know, Rachel replied softly. But be careful. Victory in court bought you time. Not immunity. The call ended. For the next few weeks, Emily tightened her routine even more. Mark reinforced the cabin's security. Margaret stopped driving her own car to visit, instead carpooling with Mark to avoid being tracked. Despite the growing anxiety, Ethan thrived. His development was astounding. At just 6 months, he was crawling, pulling himself upright, mimicking words with surprising clarity. His skin was smooth now, free of the dark fur that once covered him. But the faint hardened texture along his back and arms remained, a quiet reminder that whatever made him different was still there. Emily watched him constantly, her heart a mixture of awe and fear. One crisp January afternoon, Emily took Ethan to a small park on the edge of town. It was early, the playground empty, the air fresh with pine and damp earth. For a moment, it felt normal. Ethan giggled as she pushed him gently on the baby swing. His laughter echoed softly among the trees. But peace was never permanent. A man stood by the trailhead, watching them. He wore plain clothes, jeans, a jacket, but something about his stance, his gaze, set every alarm in Emily's head blaring. She scooped Ethan from the swing, her heart pounding. The man didn't approach, but he didn't look away either. Emily walked quickly toward her car, her eyes locked on him. As she buckled Ethan into his seat, she noticed something sticking out from the windshield wiper. A card. She snatched it, shoving it into her coat pocket without reading it, then drove away, her hand shaking on the wheel. At home, behind locked doors, she finally looked. It was a sleek, minimalist business card.
Northwest Biogénétique Initiative.
Advancing Human Potential. Building C, Private Entrance, Portland, Oregon. On the back was a handwritten note. We can help you. We can help him. No tricks. No threats.
Juste a conversation.
Emily crumpled the card, but the words stayed with her. That night, she rocked Ethan to sleep by the fire, staring at the flames as her mind raced. The world wasn't done with them. Scientists. Extremists.
Curieux étrangères.
No matter how far they hid, someone would always be watching. Waiting. For answers. For control. For fear to win. Emily kissed the top of Ethan's head, whispering the promise she'd repeated every night since he was born.
You won't let them take you.
But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her resolve. Because the world was coming. And next time, it might not knock. 5 years passed. The small cabin in the Oregon woods weathered storms, harsh winters, and the slow creeping advances of civilization. But within its wooden walls, life blossomed in unexpected ways. Ethan grew. And with him, so did the questions. By his 6th birthday, Ethan was no longer the fragile fur-covered newborn the world had once feared. His body had changed. The dark hair that had once blanketed his skin had vanished completely, replaced by smooth, soft skin. His eyes remained the same deep amber, bright and curious. His hearing was sharp, his reflexes uncanny, but to the casual observer, he looked like any other child. Almost.
Emily never let her guard down.
She watched the way he moved, quiet as a shadow, unnaturally agile for his age. She saw how quickly he learned, how his eyes flicked to small details others missed. The faint, hardened patches along his back and forearms remained, a dormant reminder of what lay beneath. But beyond his biology, Ethan was still a child. He built forts out of pillows. He devoured picture books. He asked endless questions about dinosaurs and outer space. He loved peanut butter sandwiches and hated brushing his teeth. Emily homeschooled him for the first few years, wary of attention. But eventually, she realized hiding him entirely wasn't sustainable. He needed friends. He needed a life. So she made a choice. They moved. It wasn't far, just across state lines to a quiet wooded town in southern Washington. A place where no one knew their names. Where whispers from the past wouldn't follow so easily. Mark helped with the logistics. Margaret, now a steady part of their lives, handled legal paperwork under new aliases, cautious but supportive. In the small town of Mill Hollow, they found space to breathe. Emily enrolled Ethan in a local preschool co-op. It was small, 2 classrooms, a shaded playground, a handful of patient, kind teachers who valued curiosity over conformity. On the first day, Emily hovered anxiously by the fence, watching. Ethan was quiet at first, observing the other children with wide, thoughtful eyes. But within minutes, he was building block towers, laughing at silly jokes, and chasing butterflies across the playground. No one noticed the faint ridges beneath his shirt. No one questioned his unusual grace or keen senses. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to exhale. But peace was fragile. A video surfaced online 6 months later. It was grainy, filmed on a shaky phone camera. A boy, no older than 6, was seen running through a dense Pacific Northwest forest. He moved fast, far too fast for a child his size.
HIS fit barely touched the ground.
He weaved through trees, leapt over rocks, climbed branches with an ease that defied belief. The footage captured more than speed. In the fading light, the boy's eyes glowed, amber and bright, reflecting the sun like a wild animal's. The internet erupted. Theories flooded forums.
Government experiments. Secret mutation.
Alien-human hybrids. Some called it CGI. Others connected the dots.
The Oregon werewolf baby.
The child who vanished with his mother after a high-profile court case years ago. The media's attention reignited. Emily knew before anyone called. She recognized the forest in the video. It was 20 miles from their new home. Ethan had wandered farther than she realized.
The video spread like wildfire.
News anchors debated. Podcasts speculated. Hashtags trended. And buried beneath the noise were the whispers from the past, the extremist groups, the research organizations, the quiet threats. Emily shut down their internet, locked the doors, and pulled Ethan close.
The knock came déslaté.
Rachel Monroe stood on the porch, older but no less sharp, a laptop tucked under her arm. I came as soon as I saw the video, Rachel said. Emily didn't invite her in at first. Are you with them? Emily asked coldly. The labs? The government?
Rachel shook her head. I came alone. I'm still on your side.
But Emily, this changes everything. Inside, they talked late into the night. Rachel explained that the video was already being dissected by major research facilities. Private groups were mobilizing. It wouldn't be long before authorities came knocking, not out of curiosity, but out of fear. They'll want tests, Rachel warned. Blood samples. Scans. They'll justify it as public safety. I won't let them take him, Emily replied, her voice steady. Rachel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then we need a plan. For the next few weeks, they prepared. Emily reinforced their legal protections. Mark updated security systems. Margaret helped create a network of allies, quiet, careful individuals sympathetic to their cause. But even with preparations, the truth was clear. They couldn't hide forever. Ethan, for his part, understood more than Emily wanted to admit. One evening, as they sat on the back porch under a sky streaked with stars, Ethan spoke softly. "Mom, why am I different?" Emily hesitated, searching his face, the same face that once sparked terror in a hospital room, now innocent and curious. "Because you were born to be," she answered honestly. Ethan considered this. "Does that make me weird?" "It makes you rare," Emily replied. "And sometimes, rare scares people. But it's not bad. It's special." Ethan thought for a long moment, then nodded. "Will they ever not be scared?" Emily smiled faintly, brushing a hand through his hair. "Some will. Others won't. But that's not your job to fix. Your job is to be kind.
To be brave.
To be you." Ethan leaned against her shoulder, content. In that quiet, fleeting moment, Emily allowed herself hope. Hope that the world, even if slow, might someday see her son not as an anomaly, but as a child worthy of love, protection, and freedom.
The fight wasn't over.
But neither was their story. 5 more years passed. The boy the world once feared had grown into someone far more extraordinary than Emily could have ever imagined. At 11 years old, Ethan was tall for his age, lean and strong, with amber eyes that shimmered in the light like polished glass. His movements were graceful, quiet, almost predatory. He could hear animals before they appeared, see in near darkness, sense shifts in the wind that others missed entirely. But despite the abilities that set him apart, Ethan remained, at his core, just a boy. He loved comic books and peanut butter sandwiches. He hated math homework and brushing his teeth. He built forts in the woods behind their home and named the trees like old friends. The world, however, had not forgotten him. The viral video from years earlier had never truly faded. It resurfaced in new waves every few months, on conspiracy forums, in documentaries, among fringe groups convinced Ethan was proof of human experimentation, or worse, evolution gone rogue. Emily did everything she could to shield him. Their life in Mill Hollow was quiet but carefully constructed. They kept to themselves. They avoided attention. Margaret and Mark, now part of their daily lives, helped maintain the illusion of normalcy.
But secret never stay buried forever. The knock came a warm spring evening.
Emily opened the door to find 2 men in tailored suits, their expressions professional but unreadable. Behind them, a sleek black sedan idled at the curb. "Ms. Parker," one of them began, flashing a badge from the Department of National Health and Security. "We'd like to speak with you about your son."
Emilie's pulse quickened.
"We're not interested." The taller agent, his eyes sharp and assessing, didn't flinch. "You may want to reconsider. This isn't a request." Before Emily could respond, Mark appeared behind her, his hand resting casually at his hip. "Unless you have a warrant, you're trespassing," Mark stated flatly. The agents exchanged a glance. "This is not a criminal investigation," the shorter one explained.
"It's a public safety matter.
We have credible intelligence suggesting groups with extremist intentions have targeted your son. We're here to offer protection."
Emily narrowed her eyes.
"Protection, or containment?" "Ms. Parker," the agent sighed, "you've been hiding from the world for over a decade. But the world hasn't stopped looking. We can't guarantee your safety out here. Sooner or later, someone will come, and they won't knock." Emily's jaw clenched. "And you think locking him in a lab is better?"
"No one is talking about laboratory," the tally agent assured her.
"We're offering relocation.
Surveillance.
Discreet oversight. But continued independence for now." "For now," Emily echoed bitterly. The agents left without further argument, but the message was clear. Time was running out. That night, Emily, Mark, Margaret, and Rachel met at the cabin. Rachel had driven up from Portland as soon as Emily called. "They're ramping up efforts," Rachel confirmed. "The agencies. The private groups.
The extremists.
Too many people have seen the video. Too many theories.
It's only a matter of time."
Emily paced the living room, tension radiating from every muscle. "We're not going underground again," she declared. I won't take Ethan's life away from him. Then you need to control the narrative, Rachel suggested. Emily stopped. What do you mean? Public exposure, Rachel explained. On your terms. Tell your story before they can twist it. Mark frowned.
À Media Circus?
That could backfire. It's a risk, Rachel admitted. But the alternative is waiting for them to decide who your son is.
Emily S. Mindra said. For 11 years, she protected Ethan in the shadow.
But maybe it was time to step into the light. A week later, Emily agreed to an interview. Not with the tabloids. Not with sensationalist news. But with a respected independent journalist, a mother herself, known for exposing government overreach and advocating for families like theirs.
The interview aired on National Television.
Emily told their story. She spoke of fear, love, and the painful choices no parent should face. She showed Ethan, not as a legend, not as a monster, but as a boy. A boy who loved science fiction, who climbed trees, who laughed at cartoons, who happened to be different. Public opinion split, as expected. Some viewers called Ethan a miracle. Others, a threat.
The extremiste doubled down.
But so did the supporters, human rights advocates, parents of children with rare conditions, scientists pushing for ethical research boundaries. The most important reaction, however, came from Ethan himself. That night, after the broadcast, Ethan sat beside Emily on the porch, his gaze thoughtful. Does this mean they'll stop being afraid? He asked. Emily wrapped an arm around him. Some will. Some won't. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Do I have to change, to make them not afraid? No, Emily answered softly. You never have to change for them. You only have to be kind, brave, honest. Ethan leaned his head on her shoulder, content. But as the stars blinked to life overhead, Emily knew this wasn't the end. There would be new battles.
New headline.
New strangers with opinions and agendas. But for the first time, they weren't running. And that changed everything. The video that started it all eventually faded from the front pages. New scandals replaced it. New controversies erupted. But the world didn't forget entirely. Sightings of a boy running through forests with impossible speed became urban legend. Conspiracy forums still whispered about him. But no one, not even the government, could definitively prove anything. And that was enough.
Ethan grew older, wiser, stronger.
At school, he kept to himself, not out of fear, but instinct. Kids liked him. They sensed he was different, but they didn't understand why. Once when a bully shoved a smaller boy, Ethan intervened, not with fists, but with words.
Acquiestar. A single word.
Stop. The bully backed down. No one questioned him after that. Emily never told Ethan everything. Not yet. The court records, the news articles, the internet rumors, they could wait. What mattered now was that he lived. That he learned. That he laughed. Because the world would always have opinions. Scientists would always seek answers. Fear would always chase what it couldn't understand. But love? Love needed no explanation. As the years passed, Emily watched Ethan climb trees, run barefoot through the woods, and chase the wind with wild, boundless energy. He was not a monster.
Not un expériment. Not a légende.
He was her son. And as long as she had breath, no one, not the government, not the extremists, not even fear itself, would take that away.
The world wasn't ready for Ethan Parker.
But one day, it would be. And when that day came, the boy they once feared would remind them. What makes us different is what makes us beautiful. And love, real love, never asks us to change to belong.